Now, that bill, like we told you, is before Parliament. It's expected to provide that framework. We have been talking about this afternoon. And the Senator joins me now. Senator, asante sana for making time for us today. Very first question is, what challenges have you seen in particularly, tech-founded startups that this bill hopes to address?
Thank you very much, Yvonne. It's great to be here, and your show is amazing. You're informing Kenyans about a lot of things to do with business. The biggest challenge we've seen with startups, number one, is that startups are not recognized and not given protection. World over, it is Kenya is known as the Silicon Savannah, because of the kind of innovation we're getting coming from our young people. But we've not been able to create, some special economic zone. In fact, what we're trying to create with this bill is almost a virtual special economic zone for those who are in tech startups. Now, it's important to have a distinction that we're talking about innovative ideas that are leveraging on technology, not just any startup. Like if I want to start, selling sausages, etc. There are other laws that, help SMEs and MSMEs. But this is for technology-driven, initiatives that are leveraging on, connectivity on internet, on apps. And so we want to create a nexus between academia, between training, Kenya, which already exists. We're not creating Kenya through this bill. It already exists. And investors. We want to be able to give them tax breaks. We want to give them, what we call incentives for de-risking investors who want to put in money. World over, people want to put money in these young people's businesses, but there's a risk element. So once we de-risk and say, if you're an angel investor and you put in money to a startup that has been registered and defined as a startup, then if you don't make it, you can recoup 30% of your initial investment, etc. So that's really what we're trying to do. It's a frontier for economic opportunities for our young people who already are world over acknowledged and appreciated.
Okay, and Senator, some who have read the bill, it's already generated quite a bit of debate, considering that this was only, presented on the floor of the House just, about a month ago or so. But some people are raising issues with what you're proposing to be double registration, that you're seeking them to have already been registered with this new entity, considering the fact that these would already have been registered, with government, gotten their KRA PIN. What would you say to that?
Yes, there is need for that. Of course, you're already registered as a company, and under the registration regime, you can still do your business. But because we're not targeting all businesses in the country, we need to be able to, say that yes, this is one of those that we are looking at specially to be able to be given those incentives by government and to be able to be protected. So there is need for you to, if you want to call it double registration, it is I wouldn't call it double registration, but it is saying of all these businesses that we register, these ones are applying to get special protection and special incentives as tech-based startups or startups that are using innovation and technology. And then from that step, that's when now, they can be able to have all these incentives. Otherwise, you cannot incentivize all businesses in Kenya. We have hundreds of thousands of businesses registered in this country, and then you'll spread yourself too thinly, and there's nothing special about it. So yes, there's need for an extra layer of registration. It is not that you go and pay another registration fee to go to the register of companies, but the entity that is going to be, singling out these companies that are innovative world over. If you go to Silicon Valley, you will find a repository of what they are seeing as protected, startups. If you go to Tunisia, where we benchmarked and actually seen the startup law, there's actually need for that. So there is need for that. It's the same way if you look at AGPO. Yes. Young people have registered companies, but they still need to go and get an AGPO certificate to say this company is owned by a young person or a woman or a person with disability.
Okay, and what about the eligibility conditions? Would they be deemed as too narrow? You're requiring businesses that have already registered, as a company and also registered a patent. We've discussed intellectual property here for young innovators and startups before, and we know this is something that is a difficult, if not expensive and bureaucratic undertaking. And some would say this should be, in fact, what your bill should be seeking to do to facilitate, the acquisition of intellectual property rights. Yet these are some of the conditions that you are placing for eligibility in the first place.
I'm not getting you very clearly, but I've heard you talk about intellectual property, and we're working with KIPI very closely. We want to be able to protect these businesses. We're not trying to put hurdles, but special recognition. If you're not organized, you can't be recognized, then you can't be, addressed or targeted by government. So it is actually to simplify it for them, for incubators and for startups, and to protect. Many people have great innovations, but they're not patented, or they don't have a trademark, and they're not protected. That's why you're seeing Kyondo in Japan, you're seeing Kikoi being done elsewhere, yet it is a Kenyan innovation. So that is part of it. A lot of these suggestions that we're getting, and I'm glad you've shared the website, startupbill.ke. As well as sakaja.co.ke, since it's in its initial stage, and we've seen an avalanche of very many good interventions. We're already doing forums. Then we can bring those in as amendments, both at the Senate and at the National Assembly, because it has to go as well to the National Assembly.
Yeah. And
those money bill elements then come in at that stage. So we're open. We're very excited about what's been happening. Today there's a session I know that's happening in Coast Region. We had one in Nakuru Region. We have sessions all over, and it's just gone through the first reading.
All right, Senator. I have about 2 minutes, so I would like to spend this time, I hope you can hear me clearly, because I want to pose some questions to you that our viewers have asked today, and they're posing this. Here is one question from Timothy Otieno on Twitter. He says, with the act stating that a Kenyan or a group of Kenyans should own a majority equity in the startup, won't this be a stumbling block to potential foreign investors?
The issue of ownership, there needs to be a huge Kenyan element, because we don't want to give protection just to foreign-owned companies. So there needs to be a mix. We can talk about the ratio, because some people would want to invest in those companies and get shares or get majority. But for you to get the initial protection, because you'll also not get that protection or those incentives forever. There's a time limit, because many people then want to be bought out, at a certain stage. If you look at Instagram, if you look at Google, or all of those companies have gone through that stage. But there must be an element of Kenyan, buy Kenyan and build Kenyan. Otherwise, we might find we're just protecting foreign-owned startups, yet the Kenyan-owned startups are not able to get that. So there must be a mix. And in many countries, they have those restrictions. In fact, not just with startups, in many respects, whether it is construction, whether it is in the energy sector, there must be a certain percentage of local ownership. Okay.
One final question to you from our viewers. Emmanuel Ochieng on Twitter asks, how is this bill different from the MSME Act 2012? Would it be feasible to rather amend the MSME Act so that we don't overregulate the MSME sector where startups fall?
There's a huge difference. MSME legislation focuses on any company that is, has reached a certain size. And in as much as there's been problems with implementation, what we're saying is that such a great frontier. Even I was in San Francisco at the Institute for the Future, and they're asking, why is it that they're seeing such amazing innovation coming from Kenya? And I told them the tools are the same. You're coding on JavaScript or you're coding on whatever, but our necessity is different. So while they're doing applications for luxury, we're making applications to connect people to water. We have applications for sending money, etc. And so it's a special category. It's a special frontier that must be targeted on its own. If you just put it within MSME, then you've spread yourself too thinly. There's no focus on this sector. Yet this sector has the potential of creating a lot of employment and a lot of jobs. So it has to be looked at differently. What we're trying to create is a virtual special economic zone. Because all startups can't go to Konza or can't be in one physical area. They're not geographically compact. But once you reach a certain criteria, then you get that special recognition. So it is not a duplication. There are certain elements. For instance, if we give tax holidays, we're not giving all SMEs or MSMEs tax holidays. We're saying for a startup that is leveraging on this kind of technology or providing this kind of solution to the community, then they get a special protection. We cannot do it for everybody who's making coffins, somebody making furniture, somebody selling ice cream. It has to be targeted to this specific sector within the economy.
Indeed. Senator Johnson Sakaja, the Senator for Nairobi County, talking to us about his bill. It's the Kenya Startup Bill. We thank you very much, sir, for your time this afternoon. And, of course, the views on that continue. Like we told you at the beginning, that website where you can continue to give your recommendations, whether you agree or disagree, or some of the things that you think can be added or removed. That website is startupbill.ke, as we continue to focus on startups, particularly those